Hi, and welcome to Career Mobility with James McIlvena. It's May 2025. How are you, James?
I'm doing well, but clearly you're still t-shirt weather. We're hoodie weather south of the border here, so it's getting cooler.
Yeah, it definitely is. Actually, it is a little bit cool here in the mornings, I will admit. I did actually have a sweatshirt on for the very first time in a long time this morning. But yeah, definitely not cold by any means. So great to see you today. We've got lots that we want to cover today, and we're going to talk about a little bit about the noise that we're seeing in the market at the moment. We're seeing that some of that is quite positive noise, and I just really wanted to highlight some of the things that we've seen since you and I last spoke. Brilliant amounts of data being pumped into sort of things like LinkedIn news, etc. Around, we've got things like, where's my little list? So we've got like the finance actually and tech sort of top companies actually list that came out today, which is brilliant. So we'll be sharing that into our groups as well. Top 25 largest or best largest employers as well. So brilliant when people are putting together their sort of, doing their critical thinking around who do they want to work with or for, and who have they thought about some of these organizations. So some great intel there, and then also some really great stuff from the employability index from LinkedIn as well, just talking about the top skills that employers are looking for. So lots of intel, great intel in the market at the moment, and lots of other things happening across the world and locally that we think are definitely going to impact the job market. So we'd love to get your insights, James, and your thoughts about what's going on and how it might make a difference.
Yeah, look, absolutely. So I think everyone's looking forward to if they haven't got in early, their democracy sausage on Saturday. And with that, comes particularly in government sector and government associated sector. So, you know, even the reinstallment of an existing government, or if they move to minority government, or if there's a change of government, it
Yeah.
creates a sense of pause and uncertainty. And then there's often like change of government machinations that run through all the various departments. So, election time, and it's not just Australia that's in election time. You've got India,
Yeah.
Canada have just gone to election, and then of course us locally. So there's a lot of change there around election cycles. The other one,
Yeah.
of course, is in the US. We've got reporting season, and we're waiting for really the whole world is waiting for the outcome of what is the impact of tariffs going to be. Are there going to be
Yeah.
impacts that are industry specific? Are there going to be impacts that are significant when it comes to country specific? And then what does that mean from a change perspective for a lot of employers when it
Yeah.
comes to sourcing of goods, importing of goods, and ability to export to certain locations? So I think that still is playing out. And when I was speaking to colleagues from the US on Monday, they said it almost feels like it's gone back, as was the case for the first 6 months of COVID, where people are sort of waiting to see which way it goes before some decisions are made around
Yeah.
consumer confidence and around business confidence. So that's another massive change angle. But I think, as you referenced before, we have all of these things and all this data that we're able to curate for people and actually share in our LinkedIn channel. And my
Yeah.
message at the end of all of that, and we talk about this both in our leadership development work, we always talk about it in our career transition work, which is around that locus of control.
Yeah.
You can spend a lot of time worried about the things that you can't influence the outcome of,
Yeah.
but there is one surefire way to actually stay on a positive pathway, and that is to focus on what you can control. And what you can control is using the data that's available to you and sticking to the core elements that we know help everyone in programs. And the one thing we know from over 500,000 people every year, you know, everyone's got their own journey, but everyone will
Yeah.
get an outcome.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, there are those, core fundamentals that we talk about, as you say, pretty much every time we get together, because they're just so important. The networking, making sure that you're staying in touch, making sure you follow up, all the basics, really, all the basics. We talk about it a lot. But don't get distracted by everything else, because sometimes it's not about you. And I saw a brilliant article, James, which we're going to talk to today, because I really like the context of it. I think because we speak to people who obviously in career transition, it's a tough job market for sure. But sometimes, you're doing all the great work with your coach, you're honing your source stories or your style stories, and you're making sure that you understand the value you can bring. But sometimes in the interview process, as this lady Natalie Peart puts it, you can't, it's not necessarily you or what you're doing that actually causes the outcome or lack thereof. So we wanted to talk to this because I thought it was just a really interesting perspective, because we don't usually look at this side of things. But I think to give people confidence around the opportunities that there are, keep doing your great work, because it will make a difference. And sometimes there are things that happen, and we kind of wanted to open the box up on this and share this, because I've shared it in our group, but sometimes there are things that you don't know that are going on behind the scenes. So we're going to talk to each of these, because Natalie put it together very, very well, and we want to kind of honor that. She does some amazing work with international students, refugees, and migrants, which is brilliant, and helping them to live sort of a life they love and connect to great work. So the first one that Natalie talks about is, sometimes, they already knew who they wanted to hire. Now, you and I have both been either in TA or recruitment roles. I'd love you to give a bit of an insight into this, James, because, sometimes that is the case, and we don't want to think that is what's going on behind the scenes. But, sometimes if you pull back that curtain of Oz, actually, they've already got their person in mind.
Yeah. And how that plays out is often twofold. So there might be a feeling that there's a requirement to advertise just
Yeah.
for the sake of, it might be internal policy, or it might be a range of different things, but you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. They had in mind who they were likely to hire to begin with. I
Yeah.
think I like to think, and in my experience, most people never just go through the motions and do it for the sake of doing it. But it
Yeah.
is often the case where, oh my goodness, it's going to take someone absolutely exceptional. Otherwise, I've done my due diligence and I'm going
Yeah.
with the person who I thought I was going to go with, initially. And so, as a takeout, what does that mean for any individual if you get a strong sense that that has been what has occurred to a process you've been involved in? Take what you can out of that experience. We talk
Yeah.
about time and time again that there needs to always be respect, and good recruiters and good employers truly understand the level of time investment that comes from a job application process and an interviewing process and all the prep that goes with it. And they should always, if you follow up and ask for it, give you a degree of feedback to take away. So if that has been the case, if they've got a preferred candidate, don't leave empty-handed. At least leave with some credible, actionable feedback that you can work into your planning for what you're going to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every interview process presents an opportunity to learn. That's for sure, and take away that information with you. Um, it's interesting. When I talk to people and they wonder whether they should be speaking directly to recruiters as well. It's like, well, that person, that recruiter, that is working for a customer who has a very specific remit for the person that they want in that role. And if they don't find that specific person, sometimes they can have conversations and potentially put someone forward who perhaps meets 80% of the criteria. But often the reason they're being paid is because the customer, really, the person they're recruiting for actually wants 100% match, and if not, they'll find other ways to go to market. So again, it's understanding, I guess, the dynamics at play. But certainly, if you're working direct with an organization, and they could have an internal candidate that they're kind of like, this person perhaps is 80%. Do we want to continue to train them, or how's this going to work? Is there someone who's perhaps 90% or even 100% right for the role that could be right out in market? So it's not always a sinister reason that people are going out to market. It can sometimes just be genuinely, we think this person could be good, but maybe there's someone that could be better, and they're just testing that.
Yeah. And I think you touched on a really important addition to that, which is recruiters are the same as any other role in that they want maximum productivity for the time they spend. So
Yeah.
if you have taken the time and effort, it's not just the feedback component. If you've taken the time and effort, whether that's an internal recruiter or an agency recruiter, they actually know you. They know a lot about you. And so
Yeah,
the
true.
opportunity not to actually waste that time investment and to, by you asking, proactively look at whether there could be a associated introduction or a different introduction or even an introduction that might suit for a role that's not currently open but might be a proactive opportunity in future. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it makes sense for everyone to say, hey, great, you know all about my background. Now you know what I'm capable of doing. Are
Mm,
there any other roles? Are there any other people I should be speaking to? Even if it's asking for a networking suggestion. Again, it's about taking something and taking some value out of the time
yeah.
investment for both parties.
That is such a kind of nugget of gold. I think, because it's easy to be upset and uncomfortable about not getting the role, or that it felt like a waste of time or whatever. But if you reframe that and go, well, actually, now you know so much about me. What else could we do? Who else do you know?
Yeah.
What other opportunities are there? So I love that. I think that's brilliant. And of course, most recruiters are specialists in their area as well, so they will potentially understand how to connect those dots more effectively than potentially other people. So that's brilliant. I love that nugget of gold. The second one that Natalie talks to is, if you didn't get the job and it wasn't you, it was just they didn't want to train anyone. What are your thoughts on this one, James?
Yeah, I mean, there are a number of dynamics at play here, and I will
Mm,
finish with what you can best do about it in the process.
yeah.
But the number one thing is, if you think about it again, it's the whole walking a mile in someone else's shoes. So think about it
Mm,
from the manager or the hiring manager's perspective, which is they have their own targets. They're normally often been without someone in a role or a full team for a period of time because the
yeah.
recruitment process takes time. They're risk adverse. The
Yeah.
chance that someone's not 90+% there in can already do the job
Yeah.
is a scary proposition for them. So it really does take the ability to actually call that out and address it. So much of what's decided actually is not said. So much of it is thought and not necessarily addressed. And so if there's ever an opportunity to bring the unsaid components that might impact a decision to light in any interview, in any discussion about an opportunity, then it's a
Yeah.
golden opportunity to do that. So the action that links to that is to be very deliberate and ask and say, hey, is there any skills gap you think you can perceive from my background compared
Yeah.
to the person who's doing the role? And then there are two things you can do to help supplement that. Right? One is give evidence of how you've been able to learn and adapt and been agile in previous roles. So take
Yeah.
away their concern that whatever that gap is insurmountable. And then second, show them that you're excited about the opportunity to develop into the role, because the other problem with people who hire those that are 95, 100% there in regards to their capability to do the job is there's no space to learn in the role for that
Yeah.
individual. And there's a high percentage chance that that individual either going to be pushing for promotion really quickly or dissatisfied in the role and want to leave pretty quickly, and they're going to have low tenure.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't allow for that room for professional development, does it? So it's yeah, really interesting one. So brilliant insights. Thank you for that. The third one is the interviewer was not prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think this happens way
Look,
too often.
yeah, look, I've seen it a lot. I have been guilty of it once or twice. I try and limit it as much as humanly possible. But I
Yeah,
can tell you what's really impressive if you are underprepared for an interview is someone who already has very clear positioning because they've done the research. So if an interviewer is underprepared or they're asking very generic open questions, there is an opportunity to actually take a little bit of control of the narrative and be able to say, hey, it might be a very open ended question, but it's an opportunity to say, but in the research I've done, can I just sense check this with you? I think it's important for you to know that, my background and skill set specifically matches the requirements and the direction of travel for this company because of X, Y, and Z. I'm perfectly aligned to this department's objectives because of X, Y, and Z. So it is a golden opportunity to not allow the discussion to flounder and meander and go nowhere. And it is an opportunity to sort of take some control. And you should always be going into any interview with a narrative or some key points you want to get across in that interview anyway. So be more proactive about introducing those points rather than waiting for the right question to come up.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think about, the whole idea of either managing up or kind of, it's a conversation, which is a two-way thing. When you go into an interview, it is a conversation. I mean, yes, there are questions you're going to be asked, and there's a certain level of expectation around information that you'll be able to provide, but also having questions. And as you say, being super clear, like, what the role's about as much as you can, but maybe there's some areas of curiosity or clarity that you need, which then presents a really great opportunity for question asking and also demonstration of skill set. So brilliant. And I think sometimes people aren't, they're certainly, as I said, they had unrealistic expectations. Oh, sorry, they weren't prepared, on this one. They weren't prepared, but also they may not have experience. And I think sometimes it's like, don't make the interviewer wrong, actually kind of help the process along, because then that also shows a lot about your attitude and how you're committed to making it work.
Absolutely. And you've just made that interviewer feel comfortable.
Exactly.
So you've achieved a massive goal on top of all of the skills that you've been able to articulate.
Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of people walk into interviews being very nervous, but it's like actually some interviewers are nervous because it's maybe not something they're doing every day, certainly not, regularly for some people. So good to keep that in mind. So the next one I just alluded to there was they had unrealistic expectations. So essentially, they may have thought they wanted, they actually want 10 years experience, but it's actually an entry level role. Definitely thwarted expectations on both sides there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you often see this and can sometimes pick it if you've had a job description shared with you in advance of the interview, which for anyone out there, always ask for the sharing of a job description ahead of going into any particular interview. Right?
Yeah, great tip.
It's an amber flag, maybe not a red flag, but it's an amber flag if they can't do that ahead of an interview to begin with. So you might already be getting a sense, that they're asking for everything and the kitchen sink. And so then the best thing you can possibly do is to actually, it links a little bit to the discussion before around be very, very clear on your strengths and capabilities. Do not in any way be afraid. Don't assume that by not addressing something they're asking for, that's fine. I think a lot of people do the whole sweep it under the rug. And if I just ignore the fact that they've asked for it and I won't even reference it, and if they don't say anything about it, then I've gotten away with it. I got to tell them about all the stuff I can do and they didn't recognize the stuff I can't do. Wrong.
Yeah.
It goes back under that unsaid things.
Yeah.
So they will still, when you might, as a candidate, receive feedback to say you're unsuccessful because you didn't demonstrate this particular skill, and that was part of the requirement for the role. And it's frustrating because there's a candidate, people can say, well, you didn't ask me about that bit. But they're thinking, well, it was quite clear in the job description, or the recruiter should have briefed you that that was a requirement, and so you should have come prepared to give evidence. Again, it's that unsaid decision-making component. So my point and my action for people to think about at the end of this is never gloss over or never assume that because something that was a requirement for the role isn't mentioned, you've gotten away with it. You are better in every instance to talk about your acknowledgement of it. If you have some but not a comprehensive coverage of it, reference it and talk about how you would actually build it or how excited you are to actually be building that skill as you start growing into the role. Much better response than assuming that it'll just not be recognized.
Yeah, I love that. It actually had me thinking, James, about, I talk about show and tell. And on LinkedIn, you have this opportunity to kind of almost showcase really things that you've done through rich media on your roles and things like that. And I think with this, it's almost like, as you say, it could be something you've done a little bit of, but not a lot. But if you have, there's a great way to actually show what you've done as opposed to tell people about it. And I think that can be really powerful, because people will potentially go and look at your LinkedIn before they meet you, even for an interview. So that sort of proof of concept almost of what you can do is great. But I agree with you, if you don't have the skills, actually being willing to learn and open to that, and just showing your interest and saying, look, that's an area that I don't have a lot of experience in, but I'm really interested in. AI is a great example. A lot of us are still kind of finding our way through what does that mean for us and our roles and our companies and our industries. Everyone's in that boat right now. Most people, there are a few experts out there who really got their finger on the pulse, but we're all learning. So it's okay to learn as long as you're willing to learn. I think that's the thing, isn't it? If you don't show willing, how will they know?
Yeah, and even I've started this journey. So what I've done is I've done an introductory course, and this is my
Yeah.
plan to continue that learning
Yeah.
journey. Is a really robust and good response about
Yeah.
addressing a potential gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, everyone has access to, in our programs, to LinkedIn Learning, as well as other sort of, the webinars, etc. So there's lots of opportunity to grasp information and start those learning journeys. Yeah. So the final and fifth one we're going to talk about today is the interviewer was overwhelmed or disorganized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it plays a little bit off, so I won't cover ground already covered on when they're underprepared.
Yeah.
But the very best, and you referenced it before when we were talking about the source stories or star stories. The best interviewers and the best interviewees will actually get the required information out in a very clear and succinct fashion and won't
Yeah.
ramble. And so if you sense that an interviewer is overwhelmed, then the worst thing you can possibly do is try and go, right, well, I'm going to give you more information. The
Yeah.
best thing you can actually do is become hyper focused on, this is the essence of my source story, and I'm going to tell you about it very, very clearly. And I'm going to try, and this should be part of the practice, the interview practice people are doing.
Yeah.
3.5, 4 minutes for each example should be a good rule of thumb for sort of a max response.
Yeah.
It's often not the case. Very few people I've ever interviewed actually come in anywhere near that kind of time frame with their source stories. But keep it simple. If they're feeling overwhelmed, keep it simple. And again, it might be that case where they're going to ease into, and the more you can sort of keep things simple at the start, the more they'll actually become comfortable throughout the interview, and you'll actually might pick up some absolute nuggets towards the end when it gets to Q&A. But you've helped that process by being very on point to begin with, and allow the person to settle into the discussion a little bit more. So the one big takeaway there is, do not respond to that type of interviewer by mirroring it.
Absolutely. NLP
Do not
101.
go to your list of talking points and go, right, well, okay, I can see you're a bit overwhelmed. I'm going to hit you up with every single point I want to talk about, all in the one response right now, because it's putting petrol on fire.
It is indeed. So the other things that Natalie talked to in this as well was about organizations being overwhelmed and disorganized, so that the fact that the role might the role might now be frozen, which we've seen happen a lot in the last at least couple of years, if not more. Someone went on leave, they didn't follow up, you never heard back. These are things that can happen during the interview process, and I know it can be very disorientating really for people in the process, thinking, well, suddenly they're all over me at one point, and now they're not even talking to me. Like, what did I do? And it's like, again, this is not you, this is actually a them thing. But how do you work with that? What do you do?
Yeah, look, the best thing you can do is be very clear and structured when it comes to your follow-up. So even through our career studio tool, you have the opportunity there's an interview tracker. And so you can track exactly where you've interviewed, when you interviewed, which stage, put notes in there for yourself, put reminders.
Yeah.
But the key is making sure it's almost like the follow-up for feedback. But this isn't following up for feedback. This is following up for an outcome. And so be very diligent about following up. The second point I'd make there is when following up, try and have a more unique angle or discussion point than just saying, hey, TJ, you promised you'd get back to me last Friday. It's now Wednesday the following week. Where is everything at? Because as you referenced at the start, there is often a reason behind the delay. People don't not do this. So it might be the case that when we talked about a lot of the uncertainty before, in global markets at the moment and even domestic markets, it might be the case where they're saying, hey, we're just putting things on hold because of senior leadership's waiting for the outcome of the election results before they reapprove all the roles, or there's a temporary freeze because of X, but we're just going through the process of doing a rejustification to get approval to offer on the role. So even something as simple as asking, is there a reason for the delay? Is there anything I could do or any more evidence I could provide which will actually support you in the process to get the role approved or the approval to offer to progress that? That is a much more dynamic and meaningful discussion than just a generic, hey, you owe me a follow-up, where are things at?
Again, it's such great advice. And it makes me think, assume the best. Assume the best when you follow up. Because, again, I think when people don't hear in the space of the void, it's like someone's avoiding me. And it's like, actually, that's not the case. This is, people don't tend to go to, oh, there's probably a good reason why they're not getting back to me. Or I'm not hearing anything.
And I'm very cognizant of, you can argue, well, then it would have been lovely if you could just communicate that to us. But this is actually about filling the gap when someone is, because of that type of scenario, they either are short on time or they don't quite know what to say or how to express it. And it actually requires that extra proactive outreach for you to be able to uncover what's going on. But in my experience, the majority of the time, it is not because of bad intent. It's because something is going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. And the other thing as well, as a interviewee and someone who's going through this process, you've earned the right to have that conversation. And I think that's, again, something to really bear in mind. And more than anything, as you said at the beginning, James, everybody that we work with, lands eventually. Like at some point, everyone lands. It's just how it happens. The timing, and I've written about this, I've written articles about it, is the thing we can't control. I wish we could. But it's just we don't have a time machine. We can't make those things appear from nowhere. We don't have magic wands. And it does happen. So
no, but just a really good, really lovely point to finish on is that is absolutely the case. Everyone has their own journey path. Some are much easier and more straightforward than others. Others are longer and really incredibly complex, but people do get an outcome. And it links back to that locus of control. If there's nothing else to take out of this, it's don't let the noise distract you. Focus on the things that you can focus on. There is always something you can be doing in order to be able to progress and give yourself the best possible opportunity. And that's where the focus needs to go, not worrying about the things that are uncontrollable.
Brilliant. Well, that's a wonderful way to wrap up. So have a fantastic rest of May, and I will see you for the June edition.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it. Thanks, DJ.
See you then, James. Have a great day.
You too.